We begin our story in 1969 as a mother begs a medium named Sean Sandina to help her young son. The father explains that Juan is hearing voices and believes a dark presence is coming for him. As the situation grows more dire, the mother admits her boy stole a silver necklace from a gypsy wagon. Sean examines the stolen item while an unsettling buzzing sound fills the air, suggesting they are already being watched. While they talk, Juan watches in terror as demonic shadows begin to crawl across the stained glass above him. Sean quickly begins a ritual to shield the boy, but the malevolent force is not interested in playing nice. Suddenly, an invisible power violently attacks the room, tossing the adults against the walls like they are weightless. Following this, the force throws Juan through a stone railing, sending him crashing to the floor below. The ground beneath him starts to crack and glow with a hellish fire that seems to be pulling him down. He screams in agony as he is dragged into the fiery abyss. Guess that necklace really was not worth the trouble. Sean watches the floor seal shut and vows that this evil will eventually return. Decades later, a loan officer named Christine asks her boss for a promotion to assistant manager. He notes the choice is between her and a new guy named Stu. So, time to prove she can make the tough calls. Later, she gives her boyfriend Clay a rare 1929 coin, a small detail that might carry weight soon. But Clay's mother is less than impressed, suggesting he should be dating a successful attorney instead. Christine listens sadly as she is dismissed as just a simple girl from the farm. The criticism sticks with her as she heads back into the bank to start her day. She watches Stu suck up to the boss with premium tickets. Professionalism is great, but courtside seats are better. Suddenly, a woman with long, yellowed nails taps on her desk. That is usually not the sign of a fun afternoon. The woman, Mrs. Ganesh, begs Christine for a loan extension to keep the bank from taking her home. Mrs. Ganesh suffers through a hacking coughing fit while she pleads her case. Because nothing says professional like getting germs all over the desk. However, Christine stays firm and informs her that the bank will be repossessing her home by the end of the day. The elderly woman explains she is sick and just needs a little more time. It is a desperate play for sympathy that is not quite landing. But Christine feels a pang of guilt and agrees to speak with her manager despite the official policy. So she heads into the office to present the situation to Mr. Jacks. He is busy having lunch, but the paperwork does not stop for a sandwich. He notes there is a nice profit in foreclosure and leaves the final decision up to her. No pressure, just the moral weight of a woman's life. Then she watches Stu charm a different client and decides she needs to show some professional backbone to secure that promotion. Following this, she tells the manager she will handle it personally. Time to go ruin someone's year. Christine officially denies the loan extension, leaving the old woman devastated. The look on her face says she was not expecting the cold shoulder. She suggests that Mrs. Ganesh should just find a nursing home or stay with family. Helpful advice for someone who is currently being evicted. The woman stares at her with an intensity that would make most people check for a pulse before she starts packing her bags. Suddenly, she declares that she is a proud woman who has never begged for anything in her entire life. But pride goes out the window as she falls to her knees and grabs Christina's skirt. It is a bold, messy strategy for a bank lobby. Panicking, Christine shoves the woman away and shouts for security to help. Mrs. Ganesh tells the girl she has shamed her. It is a moment that feels far more dangerous than just a simple bank dispute. The security guards move in to haul her away from the desk while everyone else in the bank tries to look busy. Just then, the old woman lunges in a sudden fit of rage. Someone clearly skipped their morning tea. The guards have to physically force her out of the building as she continues to struggle against them. Soon after, Mr. Jacks tells Christine she did the right thing. Because nothing validates a decision like a thumbs up from the boss. He asks her to finish a loan file for a big meeting with the vice president. The grind never stops, even after a public assault. Jim tells Christine she is the top pick for that promotion. But before she can celebrate, she spots a car that looks way too familiar. The yellow sedan sits quietly in the shadows of the garage, and she cannot help but feel like someone is watching her. She scans the rows of cars as an uneasy mood settles over the parking deck. It is the classic suspense moment before things go south. Following this, she hops into her own car to head home, hoping the day is finally over. But then a handkerchief begins to float through the air inside the cabin. Because gravity is apparently optional today. Suddenly, Mrs. Ganesh reveals she has been hiding in the back seat the whole time. A truly terrible way to ask for a ride. She lunges forward and grabs Christina's hair, so the girl desperately scrambles for something to use as a weapon. She finds a ruler and stabs back at the old woman while the car becomes a claustrophobic wrestling ring. While trying to fend off the assault, she attempts to drive away, which is a lot to handle for a Tuesday evening. The car slams into a parked truck, shattering the glass and making an already bad commute much worse. In the chaos, Mrs. Ganesh actually bites Christina's face. Some people really do not handle rejection well. She manages to fight her off, but the struggle only gets more intense as they tumble across the seats. Just then, she grabs a stapler and goes to town on the old woman's face. Office supplies have never been so versatile. She finally kicks her out of the vehicle and locks the doors. The moment carries a lot of weight for someone who just wanted a raise. But the locks do not stop Mrs. Ganesh, who smashes through the window to continue her relentless assault. The woman screams a curse that sounds like it might be more than just a regular insult. It is a bad sign for the week ahead. She overpowers her and rips a single button off Christina's coat, which seems like a very specific thing to steal. Then she begins chanting over the button, and the vibe shifts from a parking lot fight to a supernatural disaster. She finishes the ritual and whispers the name Lamia. Usually, things that need a dramatic whisper are not good news. Mrs. Ganesh warns that she will soon be the one begging for help. The encounter leaves a mark that will not be easy to wash off. Mrs. Ganesh mysteriously returns the cursed button before vanishing into the night like a very gross ninja. Clay arrives soon after to comfort a shaken Christine, who is currently rethinking her entire career in banking. The couple leaves a cafe later that evening while they discuss the details of the bizarre parking lot brawl. She admits she feels a crushing weight of guilt for denying that loan extension, and honestly, she should. Suddenly, a strange wind and eerie whispers startle her on the sidewalk, suggesting the weather report was very wrong. She notices a psychic shop nearby and feels a sudden, magnetic pull to enter the building. Despite Clay's obvious skepticism, she insists on getting a reading. Because when life gets weird, call a professional weirdo. Inside, they meet a man named Ram Jazz, who introduces himself as a seer with a very dramatic office. She asks him to read her fortune, and he claims he can see the specific energies surrounding her. Ram Jazz requests $60 for his services, a price that Clay finds a little steep for spooky vibes. But he eventually pays the fee with a credit card after Christine offers to cover it herself. With the payment settled, the seer leads the couple into a private room to begin the spiritual session. He takes her hand to start the palm reading, looking for more than just a typical lifeline. The man correctly identifies that she works with money, which is a pretty solid guess for a bank employee. Then his tone shifts as he senses that something vital was recently taken from her. He points specifically to a missing button on her coat sleeve, which is a very impressive catch. Following this, she reveals that an old woman stole that exact button during their fight earlier. Ram Jazz suddenly enters a deep trance, and the look on his face says this is not a routine reading. Supernatural phenomena begin to take over the room as bells ring and various objects start to vibrate. A book flies open and a glass picture frame cracks, proving that $60 really gets you the full show. During the hand reading, Ram Jazz sees a terrifying vision of a demonic entity connected to Christine. He screams and falls back in horror, ending the session much faster than the $60 promised. Clearly shaken, the seer tells the couple to leave immediately and even offers a full refund. But before they go, he warns her that a dark spirit has latched onto her soul. He suggests that someone has placed a curse on her, which really puts a damper on the evening. While driving home, the couple discusses the strange claims made by the medium. Clay dismisses him as a total scam artist using lucky guesses to scare people out of their money. However, Christine remains unsettled because he knew exactly how she lost that button. Soon after, he drops her off and says his goodbyes for the night. She locks herself in the house, hoping the nightmare stayed at the psychic's office. As she walks through the empty home with her cat, an uneasy feeling begins to settle over her. While working on her laptop, she hears a strange noise that definitely is not the cat. A terrifying screeching sound startles her, and the atmosphere in the room grows heavy. Then she hears footsteps and creaking on the ceiling, suggesting something is in the house with her. Just then, the front door handle rattles violently as something tries to force its way inside. Suddenly an invisible force violently attacks her in the living room, throwing her around like a rag doll. Following this, objects in the kitchen begin to fly and clang against the walls on their own. A monstrous shadow appears on the wall, and the situation is quickly becoming a 5-star disaster. The entity strikes again in the kitchen, pinned her against the cabinets in a brutal struggle. When Clay finally returns, he finds her injured on the floor, and the gravity of the curse is finally sinking in. Christine insists to Clay that she was completely alone during the attack, despite her very real injuries. He logically wonders how she ended up looking like a human piñata if no one else was there. The math just is not adding up. Following a medical exam, a doctor chalks the whole thing up to post-traumatic stress and a touch of paranoia. She decides to accept this scientific explanation, which feels much safer than the alternative reality where shadows can punch you. To help her recover, Clay suggests a quiet weekend getaway at a family cabin. What could possibly go wrong at a cabin in the woods? But while she sleeps, a fly crawls across her face and makes itself right at home inside her nose. The insect then decides to relocate to her mouth, causing her to wake up choking in a panic. Just then, the decaying figure of Mrs. Ganesh appears in the bed and launches a brutal attack. The horrific apparition then vomits a literal swarm of insects directly into her mouth. Christine jolts awake and realizes it was all just a nightmare, though the memory feels a bit too vivid for comfort. Later that day, Clay jokingly warns her to stop upsetting any more elderly women. If only it were that simple. While at work, she hallucinates a rotting, clawed hand rhythmically tapping on her desk. She immediately snaps at her coworker Stu for his annoying habit, but he has no idea what she is talking about. The stress boils over and she screams at him to get his hand off her workspace. In the middle of the outburst, her nose begins to bleed profusely all over the important bank documents. Her boss, Mr. Jacks, notices the mess and tries to point out the sudden crimson fountain on her face. Suddenly, her nosebleed turns into a pressurized fire hose of blood that sprays directly onto the boss. Professionalism is officially dead. Hoping to end the nightmare, she travels to the home of Mrs. Ganesh to beg for forgiveness. Instead of a warm welcome, a woman named Ilenka confronts her about the bank's role in the recent eviction. She hurls insults at the bank employee and refuses to let her inside to make things right. Christine desperately promises to restore the woman's home if she can just be granted forgiveness. It is a nice sentiment, but Ilenka is not buying what she is selling. She enters a room full of mourners and spots a photo of Mrs. Ganesh. The atmosphere is heavy with a weight that goes beyond a standard wake. In a moment of peak clumsiness, she accidentally falls onto the open casket and the body itself. If that is not an apology killer, I do not know what is. The corpse suddenly appears to attack her by vomiting directly into her mouth. That is certainly one way to get the last word in an argument. Mourners quickly pull her away while Ilenka mocks the failed attempt at making peace. Things are going great for her so far. Ram Jazz explains that a demon called the Lamia is the one actually tormenting her. The situation is much darker than a simple case of bad luck. He reveals the curse is tied to an object taken from the victim. The specifics of the ritual are finally starting to click into place. The medium explains the condition of the button does not matter because the lamia will still come for the owner. There is no escaping this receipt. Then he shows her a drawing of a woman being dragged into a fiery pit by many hands. It is basically the worst vacation brochure ever made. Ram Jazz suggests that she could appease the spirit with a blood offering, like a chicken. Because demons apparently love a good poultry snack. She refuses to kill any animals, but he warns that she will change her mind once the demon actually arrives. Following this, he hands her a book about animal sacrifice. It is definitely not the light reading she was hoping for. At home, she looks at her kitten and the book, appearing conflicted. The decision she is facing carries more significance than she is ready for. A sudden and violent banging on the door startles her while she is alone. Whatever is outside is clearly tired of waiting for its dinner. The invisible entity moves around the house, creating loud noises and rattling the windows. It is like having the world's worst roommate. She listens in terror as the sounds move from the kitchen to other rooms. Nowhere in the house feels safe anymore. She stands frozen in the kitchen as the entity continues to terrorize her by banging on the walls. It is a very loud way to say hello. The entity rattles the doors and windows while she watches in fear. This is the part where most people would consider moving, or perhaps just running. Suddenly, it bursts through the curtains and throws objects, forcing her to flee. The invisible poltergeist is officially done playing games. She runs upstairs while the force continues to chase her. The house is turned into a high-stakes obstacle course with no finish line in sight. The entity bangs on the floorboards from the level below, following her as she moves. It seems to know exactly where she is stepping. She manages to lock herself in the bedroom, but a locked door is just a polite suggestion to a demon. The banging only gets louder. Terrified, she tries to call Clay for help. But he is busy at work and completely misses the call. Classic horror movie timing. The banging on the bedroom door becomes rhythmic and intense while she desperately tries to call him again. Her situation is becoming more dire. Just then, a monstrous shadow with hooves and horns appears under the door. That is definitely not the pizza delivery guy. Her phone suddenly displays a terrifying image of Mrs. Ganesh before the battery dies. The moment carries a weight that is hard to ignore. The entity smashes through the window and pins her to the ceiling. It seems the invisible force is finally done with the psychological games. It violently slams her against the walls and floor. This is a level of home invasion that no insurance policy is going to cover. The attack stops as abruptly as it began, leaving her lying in the middle of her ruined room. The silence is almost worse than the noise. She crawls to the kitchen with a look of grim determination. She has finally reached her breaking point. Following the advice from the book, she grabs a kitchen knife. The choice she is about to make will change everything. She calls for her kitten and performs the sacrifice off-screen. It turns out the guy from earlier was right about her changing her mind. She kills the kitten to appease the lamia, emerging covered in blood. It is a desperate move born from pure, unadulterated terror. She hurriedly buries the pet in the garden just as Clay arrives home. Her timing is barely better than his was earlier. He finds her in the yard with blood on her sleeve and looks confused. This is going to be a very awkward conversation to navigate. She lies and claims the blood is just tomato juice from a kitchen accident. Surprisingly, he seems to buy the world's most obvious cover-up. He suggests postponing their dinner plans, but she insists they go. She is acting like everything is perfectly normal after a literal bloodbath. She tells him she believes her troubles are finally over. The confidence in her voice suggests she believes the sacrifice actually worked. The couple arrives at the home of his parents. Meeting the in-laws is stressful enough without having just buried a cat in the backyard. He introduces her to his mother, Trudy. She tries her best to look like a normal girlfriend and not a traumatized target of a curse. To win over the in-laws, Christine presents Trudy with a homemade harvest cake. It is a nice gesture for someone who just finished a backyard burial. Trudy seems curious and asks if the dessert is based on an old farm recipe. She explains that the secret ingredient is goose eggs, trying her best to charm her way into the family. However, the family cat Hecuba begins hissing at her from the hallway. Animals usually have a sixth sense for people who recently murdered their cousins. The interaction reminds her of her own cat, which prompts Clay to ask how her pet is doing. She quickly deflects the question, avoiding the awkward truth that the kitten is currently serving as a spiritual bribe in the garden. Once they sit for dinner, Trudy condescendingly assumes she is just a lowly bank teller. But Clay sticks up for her, clarifying that his girlfriend is actually a loan officer on track for a big promotion. Following his lead, she goes into detail about the massive medical supply account she is currently managing. The conversation shifts to family, and she admits that she is not exactly on speaking terms with her own mother. When pressed for more details, she explains that her mother lives a very isolated life back on the farm. Then she drops the hammer and bluntly reveals that her mother is a struggling alcoholic. Surprisingly, the honesty works, and the mother praises her for being so open about her family struggles. Just then, a mysterious banging sound echoes from behind a nearby door. That is never a sound you want to hear in a horror movie. She asks if anyone else heard the noise, but Clay acts like she is imagining things. The dinner takes a turn when she looks down and sees a blinking human eyeball staring back from her cake. She stabs the hallucination, causing blood and a maggot to leak out onto the plate. Dinner is served, I guess. She begins to hear an intense buzzing as the parents continue their polite dinner conversation. The evening reaches peak disaster when she has a coughing fit and a literal fly crawls out of her mouth. As if things were not awkward enough, the father then discovers a fly in his own food. Someone is definitely not getting a 5-star review for this meal. Just then, Christine hears a violent banging on the door and screams at the invisible entity to go away. She has a full public breakdown while begging the unseen force to leave her alone, forcing Clay to restrain her at the table. Following this, she flees the dinner in a panic as Clay's mother dismisses her as a sick girl who is clearly unfit for their son. She immediately confronts Ram Jazz because her animal sacrifice failed to stop the curse. Turns out, killing the cat was just a warm-up. He insists they must speak directly to the dark spirit to save her soul, and the situation feels significantly more dangerous than before. But he believes a powerful medium can help stop the Lamia from taking her. However, he warns that the demon will claim her soul on the 3rd day. The catch is that he demands $10,000 in cash to pay for the help. Desperate, she arrives at the bank looking professional and determined to get the funds. She asks her boss for a salary advance on the assistant manager position to cover the cost. But Mr. Jacks reveals the bank just lost a major deal, making any promotion or cash advance impossible. Worse yet, he informs her that he is giving the job to Stu. Talk about a bad day at the office. With her career in ruins, she frantically gathers all her jewelry and valuables at home to sell. Suddenly, Mrs. Ganesh appears in the shed and violently attacks her by shoving an entire arm down her throat. That is definitely not in the dental plan. She managed to trigger a pulley that drops a heavy anvil onto the attacker's head. The figure disappears in a spray of fluid, leaving her alone and terrified in the shed. Later, a pawn shop owner offers her $3,800 for all her belongings. She weeps while counting the money, realizing she is still far short of the total needed to save her life. But then Clay reveals he already paid the $10,000 to Ram Jazz. Finally, the boyfriend does something useful. Clay explains that he only wants to protect her because of a promise he made when they first fell in love. It is almost romantic if you ignore the demon. He later drives her to a meeting with Ram Jazz to finally begin the ritual. As she arrives, She walks toward a large, imposing mansion that looks exactly like the kind of place where bad things happen to good people. Once inside, Ram Jazz introduces her to the medium, Sean Sandina. He explains that the woman has extensive experience dealing with the lamia. The medium recalls a past failure where she lost the soul of a young boy to the beast. That is a hell of a thing to put on a resume. Despite that trauma, she expresses a fierce desire to finally destroy the foul entity. However, she tells her that they will need extra help for the summoning to work. So the group enters a grand room designed specifically for spiritual confluence. Sean Sandina explains that the architecture of this house allows portals to open more easily. The participants take their seats at a large circular table to prepare for the seance. Just then, an assistant named Milos brings in a live goat. Naturally, this startles the hell out of her. The medium quickly reassures her that everything happening is for her own benefit. Following this, she reveals a large and very sharp ritual knife. She blesses the blade with a Spanish prayer while the others watch in silence. She then explains the plan is to trap the spirit in the goat, though the plan seems risky. The group joins hands to begin the seance ritual in the dimly lit room. Ram Jazz tells her to invite the dead to mingle with her spirit. Bad advice, usually. They all begin chanting to welcome the dead into their souls, and the atmosphere grows heavy. Suddenly, Sean Sandina senses a presence and warns that something else is in the room. This will not end well. Supernatural forces cause the chandelier to shake and objects to fly around the room while everyone panics. But Sean Sandina identifies the spirit as an unsettled soul from the past rather than the demon they are expecting. Just then, a terrifying female ghost appears and screams at the group before vanishing. She commands the foolish spirits to be gone as she banishes them with a burst of fire. The medium then warns the group that the entity they are actually waiting for is finally arriving. The table shakes violently and she is thrown back as the possession begins in earnest. Soon after, she convulses on the table with white eyes as a demonic force takes over her body. She speaks in a demonic voice and reveals herself as the Lamia, confirming their worst fears. The demon declares that she desires the soul of Christine and intends to feast upon it. Terrified, Christine tries to deflect the curse by claiming her manager is the one truly responsible. Ram Jazz attempts to bargain with the creature, but the demon only responds with mocking laughter. Tough crowd. The Lamia lunges across the table at the girl and vows to come for her very soon. Following this, the group attempts to transfer the spirit into the goat during the chaotic struggle. It actually works, but now the goat is possessed and starts talking trash to everyone. Sean Sandina continues to struggle with the possessed animal during the intense seance. But the spirit jumps into Milos instead and begins attacking the group with supernatural strength. The possessed man levitates and mocks the attendees. He is really leaning into the role. Ram Jazz commands the Lamia to leave the ritual circle and return to the darkness. In a final act of disgust, Milos vomits a cat onto a terrified Christine. That is just unsanitary. Sean Sandina performs a final ritual to expel the spirit and end the nightmare once and for all. The Lamia is finally expelled from Milos as a plume of red mist, screaming as it departs the mortal realm. He collapses onto the table and regains consciousness, appearing to be himself again while Ram Jazz checks on him. But the cost of the ritual is high, as the strain proves too much for Sean Sandina, who collapses and dies. Ram Jazz gently closes the eyes of his old friend. The victory feels hollow after such a heavy loss. He later explains to a shaken Christine that the Lamia was only driven away, not truly destroyed. The man reveals that the curse is not gone yet and will follow whoever owns the cursed button. However, he suggests that she can pass the curse to someone else by giving it as a formal gift. But he warns that the recipient will burn in hell forever. Talk about a gift that keeps on giving. Later that night, she tells Clay that the ordeal is finally over. She is really tempting fate with that one. Suddenly, she hallucinates a screaming Mrs. Ganesh, a terrifying reminder that the clock is still ticking. She insists on meeting Clay at the train station later so she can handle one last personal matter. But panic sets in as she frantically searches her purse for the envelope containing the button. This is not the time to lose things. She finds it and feels an immense sense of relief, thinking she still has a way out of this mess. The woman decides to blackmail Stu over the phone, forcing her old rival to meet her at a nearby diner. A terrified Stu arrives to meet her, clearly worried about what she might do to his reputation. She informs him that she actually intends to give him a gift. Her version of a peace offering is a bit suspicious. However, she has a sudden change of heart and tells him to leave without taking the envelope. A rare moment of mercy. Following this, she views the obituary of Sylvia Ganesh in the newspaper and forms a new plan. Ram Jazz confirms that the curse can be transferred to a deceased person if the gift is made properly. So she resolves to force the cursed object upon the dead old woman. Desperate times call for grave measures. As she drives to the cemetery, a terrifying apparition of Mrs. Ganesh attacks her inside the moving car. Not even the DMV is this persistent. However, she makes it to the burial site and locates the grave of her tormentor under a dark, stormy sky. She digs through the mud until she finally uncovers the decaying corpse of the old woman. Amidst a downpour, she struggles to place the cursed button into the hand of the body. Grave digging in the rain is definitely a new low. Then she recites a formal declaration to gift the accursed object to the deceased woman, trying to seal the deal. But since the hand is a bit stiff, she violently shoves the button into the mouth of the corpse instead. Soon after, the body of Sylvia Ganesh sinks beneath the rising mud as the grave begins to flood. Just then, the corpse suddenly grabs her and pulls her back into the muddy depths for one final, disgusting hug. She finally crawls out of the pit and catches her breath. The nightmare finally seems to be over. The next morning, she washes away the mud in a shower, feeling a sense of renewal and relief. While getting ready, she hears a voicemail from her boss revealing that Stu tried to frame her for his own mistakes. Following this, he informs her that the assistant manager position is hers. Turns out, grave robbing is great for your career. She buys a fancy new coat for her trip and meets Clay at the train station, looking like a total winner. Meanwhile, Clay checks an engagement ring box on the platform, preparing a surprise of his own. The couple reunites and shares a joyful embrace as the train arrives. She thanks him for his unwavering belief in her throughout the entire ordeal. During their talk, she admits she was wrong to deny that loan extension. It is a moment of genuine growth, if a bit late for the old lady. He comforts her and they share a kiss, looking forward to their future together. While they talk, she mentions she threw away her old coat. A simple detail, but one that might carry a bit of sting later. Just as they are about to board, Clay mentions he found an envelope in the car and hands it over to her. But when he pulls the contents out, he reveals the cursed button. The one she thought she had buried forever. Christine suddenly realizes she mixed them up and gave the corpse her rare coin instead. Talk about an expensive mistake. In her panic, she stumbles backward and falls directly onto the tracks as a train comes roaring toward the station. Before the train can hit her, the ground splits open and dozens of hellish hands reach out to claim their prize. Clay can only watch in total horror as his girlfriend is dragged screaming into the fiery abyss of the underworld. The earth seals shut and leaves him alone on the platform. Looks like that assistant manager position just opened up again. Christina's fatal error with the button leads to her terrifying descent into the fiery depths of hell. Subscribe for more movie recaps.